Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today on Empowering FE Learning. Hospitality and Catering is today's episode. This is episode 4, so I can't believe we've shot through the season as quick as we have, really. I am Gavin O'Mara. I'm the CEO and founder of FE News, and this is a joint live stream production with FE News and Hachette Learning. So I'm Gavin, and I'm joined with...
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gemma Simpson. I'm Head of Product Management for Technical and Vocational Education at Hachette Learning.
So today we've got a really interesting show. I don't know if you want to do a bit of setting the scene and what we've got going next, Gemma.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So we obviously kicked off the season talking about some of the research that we've been doing into the use of blended learning as a way to improve student engagement and motivation. And that research actually stemmed from what we were hearing from hospitality and catering lecturers and training providers. So we know that the COVID pandemic caused significant disruption for the hospitality industry with closure of restaurants, etc. And similarly, the FE sector had to quickly adapt and move to learning online. And while we've largely recovered from that, this shift to self-directed and on learning hasn't really gone away for training providers and colleges, and they've retained some of those practices they adopted during the pandemic to supplement face-to-face teaching. And of course, it's essential for work-based learners. So we really see a place for bite-sized interactive content to support teaching and learning and increase learner engagement. And we know about the significant ongoing skill shortages in the hospitality sector. I think there's something like 48% above pre-pandemic levels, and huge other challenges and pressures on the sector, things like cost of living, increasing operating costs, alongside kind of changing customer needs. And in growing competition. So all of that really means that to be a successful business in the sector, you need to retain those skilled and resilient teams. So really looking forward to the conversation this morning to understand how blended learning can offer a solution to some of those challenges and support the sector to train work-ready, skilled workforce for the future.
Yeah, definitely. You put it into context of what was sort of happening the last couple of days as well. We've had immigration white paper has just come out, and the hospitality sector has traditionally been looking at different ways to be able to skill and to be able to source staff. And since Brexit, that's obviously had massive changes, and that's now been confirmed again with the immigration white paper around sort of looking at migrant workforce. So we've got to upskill and reskill our existing workforce, and blended learning is going to be key because we're coming into the sun's out and stuff, and it's seasonal for a lot of people around hospitality and catering, and you can understand why employers are going to be reluctant at times to be able to have staff go off the job. How can blended learning support that in different ways to give flexibilities to learners, which are always, if you're looking at apprenticeship sort of market, are always staff, and then how do you sort of deliver that? Because the hospitality and catering sector is going through a lot of flux at the moment. So today's really, really important show, basically. We've got 2 really cool guests. We've got Hills Mosdale from HIT Training, and we've got Neil Rippington from Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. And before we was joining with hearing up there hanging out with royals over here, Neil was hanging out with the King yesterday and stuff like that. So Neil was in his hotel from hanging out with the King. So I'll bring them both into the show. Hills, I'll bring you in. Hey Hills, how are you?
Hi, lovely to see you.
Yeah, you too, Hills. And Neil, bring him in. Hey Neil, how are you?
Yeah, all good, Gavin. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, Gemma.
Hello.
So I wonder if I could kick it off. Hills, from a perspective of a training provider, what opportunities do you see for the implementation of blended learning solutions to support trainee chefs to front of house entering the hospitality industry?
Yeah, I love the idea of blended learning, and I think it's really important to make sure that we try to offer some training solutions that will support every different type of learner. And we all learn in different ways. I'm sure every single one of the 4 of us has completely different ways of processing information and retaining information. For our hospitality learners, we know that their biggest area are their practical skills. So we can't ever ignore those practical skills because we would have some very unhappy people there. So blended means just that, and to have to be able to support the hands-on with some online learning is really fabulous. So lots of different things that we can do. We can use videos, we can use podcasts, we can use knowledge bites. I think the important thing that we learned through COVID, when we had to deliver every bit of content online, was the fact that some of it was great to be done live. And in COVID, we had a captive audience. A lot of it could be done live because people were just there to learn. But as you quite rightly said, Gavin, people are very busy. It's the busiest time of year, but they still need to make sure that they're brushing up on their skills, they're increasing their skills. And so to be able to have, my word is asynchronous, which is a lovely big word for a Wednesday morning, but to have on-demand learning so that the learners can actually access that learning when it's good for them, and they can access it off their phone or on their laptop or on their tablet, or they can have headphones in whilst they're walking to work or on the tube or whatever and listening to a podcast. I think that's the important thing. It's having that flexibility, having the same information, being able to be delivered in lots of different ways.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also being inclusive as well, isn't it? So you like you're saying, you're giving
totally.
You're giving bite size or maybe longer chunks of information to learners in different ways. Neil, can I bring you in? So I know you've got many different hats as well, Neil. But with thinking of Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, how are you guys utilising digital tools and resources to support education in schools, in colleges, and other training institutions?
Thanks, Gavin. Yeah, we do got a range of different things. Ultimately, the colleges and universities, schools that we work with have their own options. We can't enforce anybody to do anything in particular. But the Royal Academy has quite a virtual presence. They put master classes on for various competitions to give people an insight as to what should be happening on the day. Our chair, Adam Byatt's constantly on things like YouTube, doing short snippets, which he's got thousands and thousands of followers, and such a great chef. Just last week, John Williams and Adam were doing a talk about the current position. They did a podcast from Trinity about the state of the industry at the moment, what's happening in education, the challenges it's facing. And a really, really great debate on there. In the colleges themselves, obviously, I've worked with Gemma for many years in practical cookery and theory of hospitality and catering, professional patisserie, and they've always had online attachment. Back in the old days, it was through the QR codes, and more recently, we've just updated into Boost, and even last year we did a range of practical demonstrations using students for the first time, or using apprentices for the first time, to actually teach to other students, rather than having people of my age or similar in that front. So I think that was quite a powerful thing to do. And just like Hills was saying, this is a great opportunity that if you're going for a test or something like that, or you want to revise a skill, you can go online, you can go on Boost, you can hit whatever. You can be sitting on the bus. You can look at a masterclass. Through the Royal Academy, we also work with Grand Cuisine, who have produced or are constantly producing a big resource, a big range of resources. Again, looking at lecturers from different colleges around the country, feeding into short snippets of certain skills, bite-sized stuff. And I think that's the important thing. The real change is that back in the day when we were perhaps even producing some of the stuff for practical cookery, there were quite lengthy demonstrations that might go on for 20 minutes or something. And, students these days, they want something short, sharp, snappy. They want to see the key bits of information. They don't want to be sitting there for 20 minutes watching somebody making a risotto or something. They want the key bits, boom, 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 boom. TikTok as well, that's going on. So some of this is sort of formal, other bits are through what's out there, which is a challenge, because you've got to decipher between the quality and maybe the not so much. but yeah, it's a massive tool. There's a lot of pressure on colleges and universities in terms of hours these days. You know, they don't have a lot of hours to work with in terms of hands-on practical sort of engagement. You know, that's a worry in itself, but a different question. So the fact that we've got these resources on the side is just such a powerful thing to have. And you know, everybody's engaging with it. You know, that's we mentioned COVID, but that precise moment in time where we were forced to do it was a massive learning curve where everybody just had to, got to get on here, we've got to engage. And now it's second nature. It's part of the way we operate.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think it's interesting as well of how you're saying around having small bite-sized chunks is the way that everyone is consuming, you know, media in particular, but it's just to be able to help chunking that information, isn't it? And again, it's being inclusive and taking it to where the learner needs to be, really. Yeah, no, very, very cool.
Yeah, exciting. Neil, I know you've got a lot of experience of working internationally. What lessons do you think training providers in the UK can learn from that market?
Thanks, Gemma. Unfortunately, when I work with places like India, I do quite a lot of work in India, and it sort of reminds me a little of how maybe the UK was decades ago. You know, that some of these students, all of the students, they turn up, they're in shirt and tie, they're perfectly groomed in the kitchen, they're perfectly sort of equipped for lessons and things like that. And sometimes I think we've been so liberal, we've let some of these things slip a little bit. And it's quite funny, Gavin, you mentioned being at the Palace yesterday, but I was actually with one of my tutors from Bournemouth College, David Boland, and we were joking about, you know, we sat around a table talking about things, and we were joking about, you know, they asked what I was like as a student, and he said, yeah, I said, but you know, those days you had your shoes checked, were they polished, were your trousers ironed, were your whites immaculate, were your necktie? I said, no necktie, no entrance. There was a real approach to professionalism that I think we've let slip a little bit, but that's not happening in other countries, you know, especially in Asia, where those sort of standards are still being maintained. And I think as well, in you know, we're a very sort of efficient, commercially sort of driven country, if you like, and sector. And the colleges have faced ongoing challenges in terms of how many hours they can work with students, and everything's sort of in this efficiency ratio calculation, and they don't seem to have those sort of issues. I think there's a bit of a wider mindset in terms of how you work commercially, so you're not always so reliant on just government funding. It's like, where does the funding come from to make things happen? And they tend to be much more open and aware to those sort of opportunities, whereas I think sometimes we're a bit sort of narrow-minded in terms of this is the way this works, and moan about it at times. So I think we've let in some cases, it's very difficult for me to say, but I think we have sort of let in some cases our standards slip, and maybe tried to be too nice and friendly, which obviously we want to be, but I hope you take this in the right way. But I'm not sure it's doing people favors by letting standards maybe drop in certain occasions. And I think from what I've seen in terms of respect, resilience, work readiness, ambition, drive, and a sort of conscientious approach, I think we're sort of slipped a little bit in comparison to some of the countries overseas.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like with maintaining professionalism, obviously, if you're going to restaurant, to cafe, obviously professionalism is key for you as a consumer, but also as a leader and a manager looking after your team. So what other ways can you sort of see blended learning supporting professionalism, and what have you sort of seen from those high standards that we're seeing internationally around appearance and look? And because, you know, my mother-in-law would love this, the first bite is with your eye type of approach, is like, how can we maintain that with blended learning as well across the sector?
That is a very, very difficult question, because one of the issues with the sector is that it's just so diverse. You know, there's something for everybody. You know, in one scenario, you could be in a very cool place where everybody's, you know, very trendy, and there's a certain image that perhaps goes with that particular type of business and that operation, which is very, very different from maybe some of the organisations that work through the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, which is, you know, at the, you know, I don't want to say, it's a different level of the industry, if you like, a different consumer, different offer, and you know, the uniforms and the approach and the sort of maybe the formality is slightly different. So the sort of it's chalk and cheese. But in terms of, you know, when you visit any of these places, you will have an expectation that you want a good experience, you want to be served professionally, you want to be seen as a customer, you want to be respected as a customer and treated in a professional but friendly way that makes you feel comfortable and you have an enjoyable experience. So to get all of those features in place and in line is something of a challenge. But if you can't apply one stroke and it fits everybody, because it is such a diverse sort of industry. In terms of the expectations of the Royal Academy, and we work formally with 4 of the UK's colleges to offer the Royal Academy Specialist Apprenticeship Scheme. It is very much those traditional sort of standards of, you know, there's a real foundation of what we want people to learn in terms of maybe slightly more traditional, which again might be an argument that other people say, well, why are you doing things traditionally when industry's moved on? Why would you make a consommé when consommes aren't featured on people's menus? But we have a reason for that, and the reason is that they are foundations that then people can take and develop and work on elsewhere. If you don't have those foundations, it's very difficult to be able to, you know, build on them and apply them in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really cool.
I know we've talked about that a lot, Neil, in the past, that kind of
Yes,
not being too trend-led because the foundations are so essential.
Yeah. Professor David Foskett always says, he quotes Coco Chanel, that fashions change but style endures, or something along those lines.
Yeah, quite. Hills, where do you think there are opportunities to use technology to improve the training and assessment experience for learners?
As a training provider, I would say technology and the exciting advent of all of the amazing technology that we have at our fingertips now is fabulous. And it works in different ways for different sectors. We work in a lot of different sectors for apprenticeships. And for hospitality, I can give you an example that we use right now. And one of the requirements, and Neil and I last worked together on the very first inception of the Commis Chef and several other apprenticeships for hospitality and catering. And one of the requirements is that the apprentices have to have a recipe log. So they have to record recipes. And this has always been, and Neil, you'll back me up on this, it's always been a difficult area to actually achieve. But these days we can use technology. And we do use technology, and for the learners, and you know, going back to something else that Neil mentioned earlier on, just having a QR code, being able to use a QR code and just to pop everything, to pop all of the information that they need, click, and it is done, and it goes to the right place. Nobody has to move it from one place to the other, is really, really useful. And it's identifying those opportunities, but it's identifying the opportunities that are appropriate for the sector. You know, I don't want to diversify into the other sectors. We're here today for hospitality, but some of the challenges in care would mean that using QR codes with some of our care learners would not be appropriate at all, because technology for them is a very different beast. And I've been on this earth for quite a few years, and for hospitality, back in the days when I worked in hotels, you had one computer, and it was in the back office, and everybody got to use it, and the chef got to use it once a week if he was lucky to actually sort of get records of stocks or whatever, so things have really moved on apace. But these days, to be able to use AI, to be able to use avatars, to be able to use AI voice and actually do cloned voice recordings. They wouldn't use mine, but we've got some beautiful voices that are fabulous to be recorded. And suddenly you're listening to people that you know and respect. And so, and you've got this avatar of that person who is that person. It's just an avatar version of it. So to be able to use that brings that person face-to-face experience, but we're able to do it in that asynchronous on-demand learning in those short pieces, and that is really exciting. The other thing I just want to quickly say, I don't want to hog all the time, but the other side that's really exciting is that we can use technology to help with assessment, and that is really, really useful, because every single apprentice has a one-to-one tutor, and that tutor is vital because they are expert for us. The way that HIT training works, they are experts in their field. So for all of our chefs, they are ex-chefs themselves. They used to work in the industry. They've decided to come and do some giving back, and so they're actually going to be teaching and passing on their skills. They're far better teaching and passing on their skills than they are spending hours at home in front of their computer having to do marking and assessment and all the rest of it. So to be able to use AI for assessment, which we do use, which is so much better to help to just get the information into the right sort of format that we can identify very quickly what needs work and what is actually to standard. That's really, really helpful. And also, because I'm still helping out with these lovely apprenticeships and we'll carry on helping out with them, the technology even there is changing so much, so that when we're actually doing funding, it's, I mean, Neil, you'll remember what it used to be like for funding. You literally, we'd all sort of go into a room. It was almost like the conclave, it really was. But these days we've got a form, we can all collaborate together. We take it in turns because it's a fabulous little form to fill in to get all the final information in, and it goes off, and we're suddenly getting the funding that more like what we actually wanted to get. So it's, technology's our friend. It really is. We just have to embrace it and not be scared of it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. We're shooting out of time, but I just want to sort of drop a question in around employers in hospitality and catering are under pressure at the moment in all sorts of different like fields of hospitality and catering. Not just thinking of young people, but also upskilling and reskilling and continuous learning for staff. How can blended learning be the employer's friend? How can we help employers embrace blended learning more to be able to upskill and reskill their staff?
Who are you asking? Both, either us?
Yeah, Neil, you go for it first.
I think it goes back to what I was saying. Somebody like Adam Byatt at Trinity constantly putting out great posts about how to do certain things, and there are lots of examples of great people doing similar things. And you're totally right that employers have got to take action, because there's no choice. The industry is a different place than it was 10 years ago. Young people coming through, because I didn't have access to mobile phones, the internet, all of those things in my learning days. It was unimaginable that there would be so much power in something like a mobile phone that you can learn from. Whereas generations now coming through, even sort of through their late 20s, 30s, 40s, have had much more access to this type of technology, and the young ones today absolutely couldn't imagine life without it, because they've never known life without it. So employers, that they really can't afford to to ignore the fact that the world has changed. Some people have opted to maybe pull out of the industry, which is quite sad. You hear about lots of people closing and deciding to do other things and really can't make it work. Or you've got to do something to make it work. And that is like, how do we figure this out? How do we carry on? What do we do differently? How do we work with a different mindset of people coming through? How do we overcome the challenges that are being set economically through NI changes and staff wage increases and increasing costs and things? And at the end of the day, you've got to come out with a model that works. And if that model is supported by the efficiencies that blended learning and technology can bring, AI, virtual reality, whatever it might be, it's a tool that employers can embrace. And a lot of it is accessible. It's really easily accessible. It's there. It's about getting stuck in, having a look at it, and taking that time to feature it into your planning and how you can use it to overcome some of the other challenges that employers are facing.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Neil, that I'd like to add to that is that some employers are really, really proactive, and some of them are very sit back because they are more traditional. They go to that, and it's about getting those employers involved right at the very start. And one of the new initiatives that we're looking at right now, because it's something I'm really passionate about, is supporting the employers, supporting them to have a good mentor framework, so that their workplace mentors, they're our eyes and ears when we're not with the learners, and actually using technology to have some apps and some information which is really, really important, so that the employers can get to us really quickly. They can get to the learning information they want to do. They can share that learning experience with their learners, and it becomes that triangle that we've all always aspired to have. But it's just that is the modern world version, where we're using technology to actually support that, and that, I think, is a really big piece.
Yeah, no, sounds cool. We're nearly out of time, but I've got one last question I'd love to ask you both, Neil and Hills, is you could pick one policy change, one strategy, one idea that would be able to help improve things in the hospitality and catering sector, particularly around education and skills. What would it be, Neil?
Mine would be like, learn from the mistakes that have been made in the past. The one government brought in 14 to 19 diplomas as a sweep across the country. One sort of model, one size fits all, and it flopped. Another example of that, T levels are coming. It is working for some industries. It certainly didn't work in education, but again, it's this sort of one standard approach. With all the different sort of bits and pieces in it, the maths and English and the work placement and all this sort of stuff. And again, it just didn't fit. So remove that one cap fits all, and let the people know, let the people that really know what the industries need, maybe have a bit more influence in the way that things go forward, because it frustrates everybody, employers, educators. And I've seen that cycle happen over decades, and it hasn't got any better. The industry is still very confused as to, what does this qualification do? What does this one do? What's the difference? A lot of people have lost faith, they've lost confidence, they don't know what's going on, and they still revert back to the 706 series in the past because they understood it. That was the difference. They understood what it delivered. It understood what it meant and what somebody had done if they'd achieved that, and that has gone. So maybe learn from the good things that happened in the past, and also flops.
Hills, what would you want to see?
Do you know what? I'd go along with that we need to have the support for our sector. That's what we need to have. Hospitality has had to come back like a phoenix, from nothing. And in 5 years, they've done an amazing job, but they've got so many challenges. but allow the people that understand the industry to have some say in the matter. You know, we want to actually aspire to get level 7 for hospitality. It's something I've wanted to do the whole of my working career. We're this far away from it. Don't take it away from us now. That's what I'm saying. Don't if it ain't broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, and the thing is that you need to have the right people in the right room to actually make those decisions. They shouldn't be done in isolation, is what I would say.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. What a really cool show. Yeah, go on, Neil, sorry.
I was just saying, fund things appropriately. I know that everyone would, you know, want some more money, but, you know, colleges delivering in, you know, 10, 11, 12 hours a week, you know, how can you ever develop skills at a high level when you just don't have that time to practice and repeat?
Yeah, and pay and dual professionalism, and we could go on forever just on that question. It's been a really, really cool show today. Neil and Hills, Gemma, thank you so much. Next week is our season finale. We're looking at childcare. That's going to be at 10 a.m. on Thursday the 22nd. But for now, just want to say thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. And thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.